think Mike Woodson, with the roster that they have, you make a couple of tweaks, get Julius Randle's ass about it. Although I think you could keep Julius Randle if you bring in Mike Woodson. If you bring in Mike Woodson, you can keep Julius Randle, because if he can get through to J.R. Smith, he can get through to Julius Randle.
Right, because listen, Julius Randle isn't a bad player. I mean, not bad player. He's not a bad person, and that's not to say J.R. is a bad person. J.R. is just immature. Right. Julius is immature. He's a family man, dedicated to his family. So I totally agree with you. I had a discussion on Twitter before the show, and they were like, well, Mike Woodson he's a defensive coach, and the Knicks didn't have a lot of offensive play. I'm like, did you see the roster he had? I said, outside of Carmelo Anthony and J.R. Smith, where was the offensive firepower coming from? And
coded language. He's a defensive coach. He's a player's coach. No, Mike Woodson is a solid coach, man. Offensively, when he has weapons, you'll see his offense be real diverse and good. As y'all saw in that second-round Knicks team that had Jason Kidd and all the shooters around Melo. And then when he has bad teams, it's like anybody else. You're scrounging for buckets, but that's anybody. Right. So, yeah, Mike, he would be a good hire. He's good with young kids. And the most important part is it's a competent coach that be willing to come on and take all those losses. Because it's a hard thing to do to get somebody that's not just like a fresh-faced kid to sign on and take those losses. I think Mike kind of understands the ship has kind of sailed on him getting the keys to a contender. So I think he's willing to do this now, with the possibility that if he does a miraculous turnaround, he could get, he could possibly be hired somewhere else. But he's going to come in and do the heavy lifting, and eventually, when y'all are ready, they're going to move on to another coach if they do hire him. But yeah, it would be a good hire, man. Because for the now, there's really no downside to it. With Woodson, you know what I mean? He has the presence. He has what's needed as far as development. Because remember that Atlanta team, it hit its
was
ceiling
bad
like
when he
the
got
second
there.
year. Oh yeah, he took on a whole bunch of L's, which was crazy to take on a rebuild of that size. It was a full rebuild. It was on the floor, and they reworked it around Joe Johnson and Josh Smith, and that team had a certain ceiling, but it got to that ceiling. It wasn't never going to go chip, but hell, they was good enough.
Right. Listen, Atlanta. I know you are Atlantean, but y'all got lucky in the draft. Y'all drafted well. You got Al Horford. You got Josh Smith. You acquired Jamal Crawford. Did y'all draft team?
Till last Billy Knight got in the room and told the rest of the league he was drafting Sheldon from Duke at pick number 5, which he did. And like Marvin Williams at 2 instead of Chris Paul and Darren Williams.
Marvin Williams was a dicey bad. He shouldn't have been drafted where he was drafted. Maybe later in that draft he should have been drafted. And y'all also acquired Joe Johnson, and y'all had other pieces, and he developed that team.
Yeah, he did a good
job.
Billy Knight did not.
Right. and Larry Drew sticking the knife in his. I could see Larry Drew right now. If I was the coach, I would do this and that. Because Mike, he just heavy ISO. I coach a more diverse offense.
Meanwhile, Mike is every day running, trying to get Josh Smith not to shoot 3-pointers, while also encouraging Josh Smith to still get the best out of him. His superstar, best player on the team, Joe Johnson. He could win or he could lose. Ain't too much to Joe. He's still gonna go out that night and chill, and ain't no big deal. Might smile, might not. Who knows? He's a robot. So you know what I'm saying? That's the team he had to lead. Jeff Teague, who shows up once a week. You know what I'm saying? And still to this day, even back in Atlanta the second time, shows up once a week. That's what he had to deal with, man. So Woody was a good coach, and he deserved a lot better than what he got, man. And the Knicks run, dude. That Knicks run, why is that not celebrated more? Now, y'all should be embarrassed for dropping confetti for winning one playoff series, but still, He didn't
listen,
get celebrated the way he should have.
The second season that he coached, he had a lot of injuries. Also, Jason Kidd retired. Kirk Thomas retired. They didn't bring back Kenyon Martin. It was some other moves that happened. Tyson Chandler buddied up with Steve Mills and forced the wedge, team wise. That was real snaky of him. And Phil came in and Mike's contract was up. And he didn't fire him, he let him walk.
Yep.
Which he shouldn't have done.
And they were playing the ball that everybody's playing now. Remember, high-volume three-pointers, shooters all around Melo. That was how they operated, and it worked.
Right. And tall, big men who did what they needed to do, grab rebounds. He knew Amari and Melo didn't work on the floor all the time together, so Amari would score on the second unit, which was smart. And also his knees were falling apart, so he played lesser minutes. And Amari threw shade at Melo. I'm like, dude, you can't do that. We talked about this on the show. I don't know why you throwing shade at Melo. You wanted Melo there.
Yeah, well, Mark Stoudemire and Tyson Chandler turned out to be. And the thing is like, again, I'll stay out San Diego. I met Tyson Chandler when he was still in high school, bro.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? I never thought he would turn out to be the snake that he turned out to be. That is, I don't know when it happened. That is not who he was, but that's who he became.
Right. And I always liked him as a player, but when I'm like, yo, he buddying up to Steve Mills? Why, bro? Why? Nothing good is gonna come from this.
Oh man. Oh, chubby Raymond Felton probably had his best years there. Like, those some interesting teams, man.
And
those teams.
Go ahead, Jim.
Those teams are cat. You know what the thing is, because there's so much Melo hate from Knicks fans that they don't give him. They don't. In order to talk well about their team, you would have to give Melo credit, and they don't want to do that. So it's like that. It's like that team. It's like that team never happened. It's like that team never happened.
It's funny. I got a friend. He a Knicks fan, right? He say he watches every game, and maybe it's because of the Jeremy Lin thing, and he Chinese. I'm not gonna say his name, fellas, because I know my Chinese friends that I play ball with listen to the show. I'm not gonna say his name. Me and him was talking. I was like, bro, there was ball movement when Mike Woodson was the coach. What were you watching? He said, no, there wasn't, and it was horrible. I was like, yo, they were like first in. They were like first in a lot of offensive categories that you really didn't see, like 3-point shooting. They weren't the best, but they were really good at it. And he maximized everybody's talent. Like, guys still like what's the white dude who's the shooter?
Steve Novak.
Yeah.
Dudes be sitting there wishing Steve Novak could come back. I'm like, no, you don't. That's like Steve Novak is not. He's a good, wide-open 3-point shooter. He does nothing else. I said that's why when you look at his career, he got no playing time anywhere else except for here.
Yep.
And that's no knock on him. He's a great, wide-open 3-point shooter. If you run at him, he'll probably miss.
Listen, Mike Woodson got Chris Copeland paid. Okay, Mike Woodson is the reason Chris Copeland got that 3-year deal from Indiana. Yeah. And basically, when he went to Indiana, you never heard from him again.
Right.
Yep.
The Knicks was gonna lowball him, and hey, he got a family. I'm not mad at him for doing what he did. No. And he did what he was supposed to do. He got minutes and he performed.
Yep.
He played really well.
It made Indiana overvalue what he actually was. And go back to your previous point. A lot of fans watch basketball but don't necessarily know what they're looking at. So Mike Woodson got this reputation. Oh, ISO Joe in Atlanta, ISO Melo in New York. No. There's actually 2 limited rosters, and because the rosters were limited, it allowed teams to load up defensively where it looks like you're not running an offense when the reality is you just don't have the spacing you would have if you had a better team. So they'll zone off on the strong side and then force the guys who they want to beat you to get good looks and touches. And that's just what happens to rosters that aren't the best. But to the naive fan, he sees that and says, all they doing is running isolation. Like, nah, bro, it's called disrespect. Like, that's what happens in the league when your team, when your team has certain flaws. Every night, you kind of got to get beyond those flaws. Hell, other teams watch tape too. Like, they know what people can and can't do, so they try to force you into doing that. But fans, for some reason, man, they did that to Woody down here, and they did it to him in New York. All he do is run the ISO.
It's funny. Sometimes I stop talking to people. We start talking, and then I go, okay. And I walk away from the conversation because I'm like, And it didn't hurt. I know Jason Kidd was on fumes, but him and Ray Felton made a really good backcourt. And also J.R. Smith coming off the bench because Jason still has size. He's 6'5". He still was a smart point guard. I wish the Knicks and I wish the league had brought over the European kid Prigioni because he was really good also. The minutes he was given, and I would have liked to see him.
He came over too late. He came over younger.
Yeah, because he had I've been watching like some old games and old tape. I'm like, he had a little slick game to him.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Yep, too late. And J. Kidd was shooting like 40% from 3 during that period. This is when he lost his mobility. He still had the motor, so he was still running around. He just wasn't as fast, but defensively he was still solid. He could pretty much outthink everybody on the court, and he could shoot, so he kept your spacing after he lost, being that super fast, dude that he used to be, man. So, and then I think he left. He leaves there and goes to Dallas and helps them win the chip, right? Or was that before?
He got the chip with Dallas the year before he came to the Knicks, and then he retired. He played with the Knicks 1 year. Yeah. And that's why Dallas don't have another title, because maybe they could have got another title if they kept Tyson Chandler and they kept Jason Kidd and they kept Jason Terry. Mark Cuban let them all leave. And
let me get that, big dog. Mark Cuban, of course, one of the smartest people on earth, always thinks he's the smartest man in the room. He's outsmarted himself twice in the NBA. The first time, Steve Nash free agency, he let Steve Nash walk, thinking that Steve was done because of the back injury and stuff like that. And then the second time, instead of loading up and defending their title, he lets Jason Kidd, Tyson Chandler, all those guys walk, and comes back and starts making Dirk promises that he would never fulfill when Dirk started taking all those short contracts and stuff. He did Dirk dirty, man. Now, I know he's taking care of him now, but hell, I kind of want some talent with you in your prime. Like, that's more important.
Right. Or you're about to enter the end of your prime, because he hung around. He was sort of at the end of his prime. He couldn't
move.
Right. And I'm not listen, Dirk Nowitzki was a great player, but I'm not a Dirk Nowitzki fan. I never really liked his game like that. And he sort of, and dudes laugh at me or say, nah, when I compare him to Carmelo, they're not the same player. But both of them need a great point guard to get them the ball in spacing. Both of them are bad defenders. Both of them, especially Dirk at 7 feet, he's not a great rebounder. He's a good rebounder. You need another. Dirk played well when he always had another big man there who did all the dirty work, much like Carmelo. You need somebody to do the dirty work for him. And, Nas dropped. You still there?
Yeah, I'm still there. The only reason that Dirk Nowitzki even played in the NBA is because of Detlef Schrempf. Because nobody was going to touch Dirk Nowitzki.